best women's division on the planet. Now, I just qualified for the Owen Hart Foundation Women's Tournament. And for the first time ever, I can truly say that I am her.
Elegant, beautiful, illustrious. No one embodies these qualities better than the one and only Toni Storm. For her entire run in All Elite Wrestling, there is no doubt that Toni Storm is the most valuable wrestler in the company. Whether it's in-ring skill or character, Toni has become a constant presence on AEW TV and she is worth every second of it. Toni, I believe, has been such an important figure in taking a heavily criticized women's division and helped make it one of the best in all of pro wrestling.
It's my moment. It is my time to become the AEW Interim Women's World Champion.
Debuting in a qualifying match for the inaugural Owen Hart tournament, Toni was immediately given the spotlight when she came in as a surprise competitor against The Bunny. Being a big-name wrestler that built her reputation in Stardom, the Indies, and WWE, Toni's arrival was met with a warm welcome as well as hope for her to reach her full potential in AEW. During her run in the Owen, Toni was able to make it all the way to the semifinals against one of AEW's most prolific wrestlers in Britt Baker. While both women put up a good fight, it was Jamie Hayter at ringside that made Toni lose focus and eventually the match to Baker. But regardless of this loss, this match would be a catalyst to help Toni Storm's popularity in AEW. This kickstarted a hot feud against AEW's resident bad guy at the time in Britt Baker, and opposing her would help Toni quickly elevate herself as AEW's resident babyface. Especially after she showed that she can hold her own against one of the best AEW has to offer. Shortly after their first encounter, Britt and Toni would meet again in a rematch, putting on a hard-hitting display, showcasing not only their great chemistry with each other, but a growing animosity against each other as well. And that emotion helped Toni be a step ahead and get herself a win against the Doctor. With a win against DMD, Toni's presence and performance finally drew the attention of the Women's World Champion Thunder Rosa, calling out the newcomer to a title match at Forbidden Door. But at this point, Toni wasn't ready. Despite her rapid rise to the top, the pressure would catch up to her, losing to Rosa at the pay-per-view. But despite being opponents during the match, both Toni and Rosa had a newfound respect for each other and formed the tag team Thunderstorm. This tag team quickly showed that they are a force to be reckoned with, as their in-ring styles complemented each other well. The plan and the booking here was genius. Despite Toni's loss at Forbidden Door, keeping her close to Rosa kept Toni in the title discourse, and it more than guaranteed an eventual rematch for the title at All Out.
I am starting heartbroken, and I feel I'm letting you guys down. For today, I have to step down as the Women's World Champion. I'm no longer able to defend the championship due to an injury. So on September 4th, at All Out, there will be a new interim Women's World Champion. And Toni Storm, my friend, my tag team partner, I hope that your dreams come true and you become the new champion, the interim new champion.
An unfortunate injury to Thunder Rosa would derail the match, and an interim Women's World Championship was created to fill in for Thunder Rosa's absence. Toni Storm, Hikaru Shida, Britt Baker, and Jamie Hayter were all participants in the four-way match to crown a new champion at All Out. And while at first the heels in Baker and Hayter had the upper hand, teaming up to take out both Shida and Storm, eventually both women found themselves at odds against each other because despite their alliance and friendship, only one woman can walk out the champion. And in the midst of their debacle, Toni was able to use the element of surprise to her advantage, pushing Baker off the assured victory to deliver the finishing blow herself against Jamie Hayter to win the interim Women's World Championship. It really was a matter of being in the right place at the right time for Toni Storm. Her rise to prominence as a babyface in the women's division has been nothing but well-earned. Ever since her arrival, the quality in matches have definitely improved, pushing her opponents to their best to always deliver an entertaining match. And this influence was evident in her reign, as Toni put her title up against the best of the women's division like Serena Deeb, Athena, Britt Baker, and Hikaru Shida, before losing it to a white-hot Jamie Hayter at Full Gear.
When I became a champion here in AEW, when I became an interim champion. Just the interim, not the real champion. I wore it with a smile on my face, and none of you appreciated me at all. But your current champion literally cheated to beat me, and you loved it. Loved it.
But after everything she has given for the fans, the women's division, and for AEW, Toni Storm felt slighted at how the audience reacted to her title loss. And to remind you, she didn't lose the title just to anyone, she lost it to Jamie Hayter, someone that has been terrorizing her ever since she debuted in AEW. And Toni didn't even lose it fair and square, with Britt and Rebel giving Jamie an upper hand in a match to dethrone Toni, as the fans cheered for Jamie's tainted title win. This love of the fans for Jamie helped her slowly turn into a babyface. But this would come at a cost, as Toni would eventually turn heel in the process. And Toni would find common cause with a couple of other wrestlers that felt disrespected by the fans in Soraya and Ruby Soho to form the Outcast. Forming made a lot of sense. Thematically, they are three wrestlers that found popularity in WWE, left, and tried to make a home in AEW. While they were warmly welcomed at first, the audience would eventually leave them in favor of so-called AEW originals like Hikaru Shida, Jamie Hayter, Willow Nightingale, and Sky Blue. And the Outcast would rightfully respond to this perceived disrespect, with they themselves disrespecting these fan favorites. Toni, Ruby, and Soraya together were a menace, cheating at every turn they could and spray painting their opponents with their signature green color. The war between Originals and Outcasts would lead to a rematch between Jamie Hayter and Toni Storm for the Women's World title at Double or Nothing 2023. Toni came into this match with a vengeance, as she and the Outcast would attack Hayter before the match even started. Despite Britt Baker and Hikaru Shida evening the odds, ultimately Toni would beat Hayter the same way she lost the title at Full Gear, pushing Hayter to an exposed turnbuckle to seal the win, and become AEW's first ever two-time Women's World Champion. And while the Outcasts were on top of the world, this win held a lot more meaning to Toni Storm, because in this reign, she's no longer just an interim women's champion. She's now the champion in the women's division. However, trouble would soon visit paradise when Hikaru Shida challenged Toni Storm for the title at Dynamite 200. And despite Toni being a capable and skilled wrestler, she and the Outcasts continued to pull every card up their sleeves, causing distractions, throwing weapons in the ring, and even spray painting Shida in an attempt to overwhelm her. But Shida proved her fighting spirit, kicking out against all odds, much to Toni's surprise, and after a reverse roll-up, Shida would win back the title, much to the shock of Toni Storm. And while Toni has lost the title before, and it led her to becoming the Outcast, losing the title a second time would break Toni. It's as if she lost a piece of herself when she lost that title. Toni's spiral and loss of control would eventually affect her relationship with the Outcast. And while at first her promos and outbursts made her sound insane, soon we'd all realize that Toni would stumble into something timeless.
Wondering, do I have it? Or am I just lucky? When every match, every minute, every pay-per-view is just a roll of the dice to see if it'll all be taken away. That's what you don't know, because you can't know, so you won't know!
Okay, but you're not even old!
Oh, yes. I'm timeless. I'm timeless. I'm timeless! I'm timeless!
On the road to All In, Toni has forged a path to redeem herself, being put in a four-way against the champion Shida, Britt Baker, and fellow Outcast Soraya for the Women's World title. And this match mirrored a lot of the first time Toni won the title. It was in a 4-way again, but this time it was her and Saraya who had an advantage, being teammates and taking out both Shida and Baker to better the odds among themselves. But it wasn't smooth sailing for the Outcasts. Toni's spiral into madness has left her spiraling away from her friends in Saraya and Ruby, with their friendship now put on the test with the title on the line. As much as Saraya tried to convince Toni to give her the win, Toni didn't budge, and their argument would lead to Toni accidentally hitting Ruby Soho, and after some more misunderstandings, Toni and Saraya's brittle alliance would eventually break. And in the midst of Baker and Shida, who were wrestling each other, struggling for submission, it was Saraya who was able to steal a victory, pinning Toni behind their backs to win the championship. After failing to win back her title and being ousted by the Outcasts, Toni continued to lose her grip on reality, showing glimpses of her psyche through backstage promos and vignettes. And this version of Toni Storm believed only one thing. She was a star. A main character, if you will. Toni believed there weren't any stars anymore in AEW, and now she takes inspiration from the stars of the golden age of cinema. But truth be told, when things don't go Toni's way, this breaks the illusion in her mind. And after recent events like losing the title and losing the Outcasts in the process, this broke her enough that the illusion has spilled over to real life. Thus the black and white whenever she appears. And needless to say, this timeless Toni Storm gimmick was an unprecedented sensation. Toni has always been good on the mic, but in this role, she has flourished into something greater. And AEW made sure to give Toni everything. And surely enough, this trust in Toni Storm would pay off in spades as the audience grew to love her antics. And ultimately, these so-called antics would lead her back to the world title, now held again by Hikaru Shida.
What happened to you, Toni Storm? You want this title? I don't think so. You want just addition to your city acting.
You happened to me, darling. You happened. I was meant to walk into Wembley Stadium with that title, and then you happened. And I thought, it'll be fine, dust off the old knees. I'll just win it again and become the first ever 3-time AEW Women's Champion, and then you happened again. Well, you don't happen anymore. I happen. I couldn't make history, so I became history.
The setup for this rematch was also just perfect. Hikaru Shida was being stalked and tormented by Timeless Toni's shenanigans for weeks, and she was finally full of it. She didn't approve of seeing what Toni has become and was ready to beat sense back into. Meanwhile, Toni had every reason to target Shida. Aside from wanting the championship, Toni pointed out that it was her loss to Shida at Dynamite 200 that led to her breakdown. And despite having won the love and intrigue of the fans, Toni would never be the star she claims she is without the gold around her waist. Even if Shida had Toni's number when it comes to skill and physicality, Shida had no preparation for the number of hijinks Toni had planned to steal the win. Sure, Shida is no stranger to her opponents cheating, but Toni, using Luther her butler, a golden shoe, and a steel pan with subtlety, would eventually overwhelm Shida, with Toni taking the win and regaining the gold to become a 3-time AEW Women's World Champion. Toni Storm went from contemplating retirement after her WWE exit into becoming one of the most important and influential women's wrestlers of all time. AEW saw something in her and gave her the chance to shine straight out of the gate, and Toni ran with it. While the whole women's division deserves its flowers for improving together these past few years, Toni's arrival is definitely one of the big catalysts that helped push the women's division into what it is today. From her matches, and especially when she became Timeless Toni, she became a must-see attraction, and being women's champion 3 times by this point of the story will only help put more eyes on the division. AEW was smart to capitalize on this lightning in a bottle, because by all accounts, Toni has transcended pro wrestling and has been making the rounds in mainstream media. This continuous reinvention of herself and the seamless transition from the Rockstar to the Outcast to the Timeless One has been nothing short of phenomenal. And while Toni finally being champion again and getting the spotlight she wanted back to her, all was finally right in the world. That is until...
Here you are. We're here to capture this wholesome moment. How are you feeling?
I'm so excited! I can't believe it's happening!
Well, go ahead.
Thank you all so much for watching. And if you want to see part 2 of the Timeless Saga, please like, share, and subscribe. All of it really helps to grow this channel, and I thank you all for your love and support. Anyways, I'll see you all again very soon, because there are still more tapes to rewind.